Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode on Forged from Iron. Before we get started in today's video, make sure you go down below, drop a thumbs up real quick. It only takes 2 seconds and I would really appreciate it. It'd help the video a lot. And today I was going to be diving into arm training, but I think it may be more beneficial to split arms up between biceps and triceps, just so you guys can better digest the information and it's not overwhelming. So today we're going to be going into the biceps and specifically how to train them. So first of all, like we always do, let's go over the anatomy of the muscle. So the biceps take up the anterior portion of your arm, which means the front side, and the triceps take up the posterior or the backside. The bicep is comprised of two heads, your long head and the short head. The long head being the outer part of the bicep, with the short head being the inner one. Now these two heads both originate from points on the scapula, different points albeit, but however from the scapula, and they combine into one tendon that then inserts around the point where your humerus and lower arm meet. And the humerus is the bone basically from your elbow all the way up to your shoulder joint. That bone is known as the humerus. And since the muscle fibers all run relatively up and down, when the biceps contract, it's going to cause flexion of the forearm and supination. So basically what that means is it causes your forearm to flex and bring your arm up like that. And then it causes supination, which is outwards rotation of your arm. Notice how if you think about a curl, they're usually done with a supinated, outwardly rotated arm. That's because that's one of the functions of the biceps. Another significant muscle dealing with your biceps and forearm flexion is going to be your brachialis. Now the brachialis lies right under the bicep, so it's actually not really visible unless you're probably like, you can probably see it if you're really low body fat, but in most people it's not going to be visible. However, since it lies right under the bicep, it actually does contribute to getting a bigger arm. So if you're getting into aesthetics and bodybuilding, you don't want to skip out on training the brachialis, or regardless, you don't want to be skipping out on the brachialis, and I'll get into why in a second. Now this muscle originates from the inferior of the humerus, which basically just means the lower half. So unlike the biceps that start around the shoulder joint, your brachialis is going to start at a lower point than that, and it inserts into the ulna, which is one of the two bones of your lower arm, basically making up your forearm. Contraction of the brachialis, similarly to the biceps, also causes flexion of the forearm, and it is actually a stronger flexor than your actual biceps in terms of forearm flexion. So that's more reason to not skip out on training your brachialis. It will be involved in any flexion movements of your forearm, so if you do like a curl or something. However, I believe you should always include at least one exercise every so often that specifically focuses on the brachialis because of this fact that it's such a significant part of forearm flexion. Now, it is also noteworthy of the fact that the biceps also slightly assist in forward flexion of the whole arm at the shoulder joint. Now, basically what that means is getting your whole arm moving upwards. And so that's why at the top of a curl, after we have the weight here, we can actually maximize the bicep activation by lifting our arm a little bit more, our whole arm a little bit more once in this position to achieve. And if you do this at home, you'll feel a little bit more bicep activation once you get it from this point to this point. That slight arm elevation from the shoulder joint is going to make a big difference. So when it comes to weight training, these are the two muscles we want to target when we're talking about the anterior portion of your arm. Moving into some exercises, today is going to be curls galore. Pretty much because of the nature of training the biceps and how it requires forearm flexion, pretty much all of the exercises you're going to be doing are going to resemble a curl in some form, because that's pretty much the only range of motion that this muscle is used in. And so we instantly go to a curl. Here we can choose either between dumbbell or barbell curls. Each has its pros and cons, to be honest. They're pretty similar and you don't need to do both. this comes down to personal preference, really. I'll have on screen both variations so you can kind of see what it's like. The dumbbells do let you get a little bit more extension at the bottom. However, you're likely not able to load as much weight. However, with a barbell and more weight, you're also more likely to hide muscle imbalances between both of your arms. And so something like dumbbells, where it's the equal weight distributed in both hands, is going to not be able to hide your muscle imbalances as if you were doing like a barbell curl. So like I said, pros and cons. It's really up to you what you want to do here. Form tips I would say with biceps training is always try to keep your elbow in one place while you're flexing it up. Although you will have to move it slightly if at the top you are bringing it upwards a little bit to get the maximum bicep activation. However, it's a general good rule of thumb to follow and will help you activate your biceps much more and get that solid mind muscle connection. Also, you're really going to want to flex your core in these movements because of the fact that it's hard to keep still when you're actually raising the weight up. And what I mean by this is your body is going to want to compensate to try to get the weight up if it's too heavy by leaning backwards a little bit. Now that's okay. However, you shouldn't do it too much, or it shouldn't be an exaggerated lean back like, oh, you're really struggling to get the weight up. So therefore, if you keep your core tight, back straight and whatnot, it's going to help you overall in terms of training that muscle effectively. If you're one of those people that tends to skip out on the bottom bit of the movement, you should not do that for multiple reasons. Just to briefly go over them, the main ones are, number one, the hardest part of the movement of a curl is actually at the very bottom. And so you don't want to be skipping out on that if you're trying to build muscle, because the harder it is, the more muscle you're going to build when you do the exercise. So you're actually cheating yourself a little bit in a sense if you don't go to the bottom of the movement. A good mental cue to use for something like that would be to flex your triceps at the bottom of the exercise, because of the fact they're antagonists to the biceps, which means they serve the opposite function pretty much. Now you don't have to flex your ass off, but just a slight flex will do if you're going to try that out. Moving on, let's go to the preacher curl. This is a very good exercise in my opinion. I'm personally doing it here standing. I just prefer it that way. It feels more comfortable. Pretty much the same things apply here for all the other ones. You're going to want to try to keep your elbows still. You're going to want to go all the way down, especially for a preacher curl. Going all the way down is going to be crucial. And depending on the grip you use, you can actually shift the focus a little bit onto either like the inside or outside, long head, short head of your biceps. Here I'm using the easy bar, and so I'm taking the narrowest grip possible, because for me personally here I'm trying to target the outer head of the bicep. A general rule of thumb that works for the most part in biceps training is what the part you can see of the muscle is the part you're going to be mainly targeting. And so if I have a narrower grip that's slightly inwardly rotated, I'm going to be targeting the outer head more so than the inner head. And vice versa, if I have a wider grip where my arms are rotated outwards a bit more as I curl, it's going to focus more so on the inner head of the biceps. And speaking of which, that actually segues us right into our next exercise, where I'm trying to purposely target this inside portion. And so you see me set up this sort of cable curl on the cable machine. Here I'm basically doing a front double biceps pose. And so similar rules apply once again. You can see my elbows are relatively still in the same position as much as possible, I like to believe. And yeah, there's not that much to say here. So, and then moving on to some brachialis training, hammer curls, your best friend. Once again, another curl. However, by just simply taking an unsupinated grip, we're going to be able to target the brachialis much better. And so hammer curls, very good option here if you want to just do them like here I'm doing, where it's just a completely unsupinated grip and you're just basically doing a curl otherwise. Here we also have an alternate variation where instead of doing it like a normal curl, I am actually internally rotating my arm. And now this exercise is still targeting your brachialis. However, like we mentioned earlier, you're exposing more of your outer bicep. And so you're going to be able to target that part a bit more with this exercise. So I sort of like to do this one because it's the bang of both worlds. So I've been doing this exercise just because I've been wanting to get the outside of my biceps a bit better while not skipping out on brachialis training. So if you're trying to do something like that, this is a very good option. However, with something like this, you're going to have to go one arm at a time as opposed to something like the other variation of hammer curls where you can go both arms at a time. There are disadvantages and advantages with one arm or two arms at a time. Two arms at a time with any curl is going to be more difficult because it's going to be harder to stabilize. Like I mentioned earlier, if the weight's too heavy, you're just going to want to lean back to get the weight up. However, because it's more difficult, you can argue that you're going to make more gains over time if you keep doing it. On the other hand, with single arm curls, it's arguable that you're able to get like a better contraction and stuff and more mind muscle connection because you're able to focus on one arm at a time. Basically, the logic is it's easier to give all of your attention on one thing than to divide your attention on two things. If that makes any sense, you know, one arm, two arms type of deal. Like I said, again, it comes down to personal preference. As long as your form is on point with any of these curl variations, you're going to be chilling. You're going to be good. Well, that about wraps up this video on biceps. I know this has got to be pretty much the most straightforward video yet because of the fact that this muscle is probably the simplest to cover at least. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and hey, don't forget to be hitting the gym. Alrighty guys, that's it for me today, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out.